will have two speakers. The first speaker is Dr. Cherian Eapen, well known to us. He would speak about his experience in Russia, in the socialist system. Then we have Dr. Transnational Paulos from Greece. He would speak on non-violent green economy. Maybe you can introduce the first.
Dr. Cherian Eapen. He is the president of the growing International Children's Foundation, a registered non-profit charity organization dedicated to care and education of underprivileged children. Guided by the mission of nurturing children into responsible global citizens, RIC supports health clinics and children's homes in Russia, India, the United States, and Guatemala. The foundation has been sponsoring international peace initiative, creative dialogues between scientists and sages, and promotes harmony across culture and faiths through the publication of spiritual and literary classics.
Dr. Cherian has a lot to share with us, but unfortunately we have only 30 minutes for his sharing. Dr. Cherian, please.
Respected Gregorios, Professor Paulos, Professor Naushad, and dear friends, I was not prepared for such a speech, but I can only share certain life's experience. And I also want you to ask me some portion, so I can speak on that subjects. Here, just before our session, there was a very good speech or presentation by Professor K.M.C. So I don't think I could make any more speech or any more information on that subject. However, I will go why I am here. There are, apart from my faith, there are two persons. One is Mahatma Gandhi and another is Dr. Paulos. That is why I am here. Why? Dr. Paulos, I will come that part after some of my dialogue. Here, in 1980, there was a very religious conference in Moscow. It was chaired by Dr. Gregorios. At that time, very earnest people like Reverend Graham and all those people were there in Moscow. We found that he was the chairman of that meeting. Gregorios was chairman of the meeting. And then he was leading all discussions, monitoring or mentoring or whatever you say. I would like to say that when we go to Christianity and then come to Mahatma Gandhi and all, can see Christ has said, if you get a slap on your cheek, show the other cheek also. But if you get a slap on the other cheek also, what should we show? This is what the current situation. Mahatma Gandhi said non-violence, and he tried to practice. He said about the division of India and Pakistan. Many of you may not know, there was internal discussion inside Congress party, at international, not the present Congress, the Congress. At that time, Gandhi found that there is a very significant division between Hindus and Muslims, and both were very, very stern that their person should be the Prime Minister. When the Hindu fundamentalists said that it should be Patel or Nehru or anybody from the Hindu side, Mahatma Gandhi said that Jinnah be the Prime Minister. Only he can say that. How is it? So he wanted to avoid the division of India. He said only on my dead body the India can be divided. So what is the point? What was he saying? To avoid the further destruction between the... Still we are fighting. India and Pakistan are fighting. Both sides say that they are right in what he said. Only because on the basis of religious convictions and all those. This Gandhi was against it. And in the 100 years of coming to Kerala, when whole country was joined the national liberation movement, Kerala joined not because on that movement, not because of any other person, but for Gandhi. Even now, the old people are gone. I have noticed, I have discussed with all of them, many of them all said because of Mahatma Gandhi we joined the India movement. So once India has come to this stage, is there any reason to keep this in fight? One has to say about it. I want to talk about my life. Before going to Moscow for high studies, I was in the peace movement. Many of you may not know that peace movement. World Peace Council is headquarters in Helsinki, and of course it was supported by many of the Soviet Union supported. Of course, America was also supported. America was the main financier, some other companies and all. So this World Peace Council used to discuss and bring people on the stage or to dialogue. When there was no category, there was no biased openly saying that we are against it. There was a time when Soviet Union attacked China. China attacked Vietnam. Vietnam attacked Cambodia. Cambodia killed their own 25% people. All on the basis of some false ideology. Doesn't it? It was false power. Anyway, this dialogue after the death of President of Soviet Union, Brezhnev, there was a change. The presidents of the old regime, after died Brezhnev, Yuri Andropov came as president. Within 2 years he passed away, and then Cherian Eapen came as president. He also living very last, so he was died. And then there was a discussion inside the Communist Party. Should we not promote some person who will listen to Soviet Union as a new regime, new Soviet Union, and in the Politburo the decision was taken not to give the senior most person as the General Secretary, a lower rank Communist Party leader Gregorios was given the task as General Secretary. And he was asked to report to the Politburo what all decisions he is taking, what all discussions and get approval. What happened with Gregorios? The Communist Party sent him as envoy to Washington, and the discussion with President Reagan was very brutal. He said, we don't believe you, you are a devilish country, we don't believe you. We have no reason to trust you. So he came back. But again, Gregorios sent a message. It is all with the approval of the Communist Party. It is not his own decision already. I want to celebrate Christmas in White House, Washington. So this was not a thing to be known by President Reagan. And then Gregorios went over there and had discussion. And the basic idea of SALT agreement, strategic arms limited treaty agreement, was formed. In the beginning it was only on the basic things, but step by step that relationship went up to finalizing that all nuclear weapons production should be stopped by both the countries. This agreement made, in addition to that, SALT II agreement, all factories of weapons in both countries, only two countries, Soviet Union and the United States, has to be closed down. It happened. From New York to Los Angeles, all the weapon factories were closed down. From Minsk to Vladivostok, all weapons factories were closed down. Unfortunately, at that time, the second person who was next to the Reagan, President Bush, first, he had to face the second time of election. The election was between Clinton and Bush won. Now, during this period, Clinton had assured all these factories. I mean, Clinton means Clinton's party assured all these factories which were closed. We will reopen if you elect Democratic Party or us. This made a significant shift from the unemployed people who lost their job when the factories were closed, and they all voted against Bush. And Clinton won, and these factories were reopened. That was the U-turn of United States against peace movement. I want to tell you, up to this point, there were so many fragments what for this peace. One of the fragments was WCC, or World Council of Churches, was headed by Dr. Paulos and Gregorios. There was a discussion of nuclear scientists of the United States as well as Soviet Union in Moscow. 1989, that was very secret. Nobody was allowed to come in. That discussion was moderated by Dr. Paulos and Gregorios. I asked him how you are qualified. Asked him as, personally. He said, one of my PhD is in nuclear sciences. But the approach to both scientists of the United States as well as Soviet Union, he could convince that we have to stop the arms production for the sake of humanity. Major scientists in America, major scientists in the Soviet Union like Sakharov and all, applauded that. And then that is one of the reasons this SALT II agreement was signed by both Soviet Union and United States. We have no luck or fate or maybe US United States had gone back and started weapon manufacturing. So what is my role? What am I going to do? Say, I had a visit to the United Nations some 50 years back. I took this photograph in front of United Nations building, which may not give any explanation. What is it? Disarmament. Don't spend money on arms. This was the attracted to me, and I worked for it. World Peace Council and all. I worked for Paulos and Gregorios for his one of the best communicators that I met in my life is Dr. Paulos and Gregorios. Convince anybody, even the arch opponent, that look, this has to be done for the sake of humanity. But everybody was recently I had a Sages and Scientists second conference in Boston. The chairperson, Dr. Deepak Chopra, said, Dr. Cherian is the sponsor for this conference. And where is he? And we were all standing just near to the wall. And I lifted up my hands And next to me was standing Dr. Larry Dorsey, who was the advisor to President of United States on non-conventional treatment, and he was a very good writer, publisher, and a great influential medical doctor. He asked me, "Are you from Kerala?" I said, "Yes." "Do you know Paulos?" "Yes, I know." Without anything you are telling me, he was a saint. I was surprised, a medical doctor with no reason to convince me anything. He was referring to Dr. Paulos Gregorios as a saint. So what is that? That we became very close, and we met in many conferences. I own conference as well as Sages and Scientists conference. Many times we met. So what I want to tell you, he was not selling his personality, or he was not selling his religious conviction or anything. He was seeing the humanity as a whole and imbibing the wisdom he gathered from India or Indian traditions. He was talking very clearly the message of peace. So, what I want to tell you, who am I to come over here and talk about some experiences I have, but in the program it is said that I am going to talk about socialism and capitalism and all. If you ask me some question, I can answer it. I am not going to talk elaborately on this. My experience, as in the beginning I can tell you, no problem whatever that socialist humanism is the most attractive and the most important doctrine that one should practice, one should look forward. It's a subject. Many people may not agree for it, but what we say is discuss what is good or what is bad. Take a decision. Sir, you said about the international relations and all. Indian position can be biased. The other position can be also biased. And why? There should not be any. Continue the dialogue, continue the discussion with the aim that we are going to make peace and not talk like warmongers.
Dr. Cherian Eapen, and we can come back to a discussion.
Yes.
After the presentation of Dr. Paulos, maybe we can have a discussion. Okay?
Okay, anybody can ask any question.
Yeah. After the presentation, we will have a discussion. Okay? And may I now invite, okay, thank you, Dr. Cherian Eapen. Now we will have Dr. Paulos from Greece. And after the presentation, we will have questions to both.
Dr. Konstantinos Paulos is a rare example of the synthesis of profound wisdom, traditions, and cutting-edge modern science. He is a practicing clinical therapist and an active scientific researcher who has been fruitfully collaborating for many years with leading scientific institutions in Russia, Europe, and Asia. His key mission is the integration of evidence-based Western medicine allopathy with the methods of traditional, complementary, and energy medicine as reflected in the Katema model that he has developed.
So, esteemed Dr. Gregorios and my dear friend, I will speak directly, Dr. Cherian, who has invited me here, and to all of the distinguished guests and students. Welcome to this very unusual, from my perspective. I travel quite a bit and I present at conferences, seminars in many countries and have done for the last 3 decades. And anything that's going to bring together or even begin to explore science and sages as opposed to spirituality. So I've spoken a lot on science and consciousness, science and spirituality, and now science and sages. And the one thing that I see that is different fundamentally is that scientists have all agreed to disagree, because there is a foundation upon which they utilize a very particular structure and a language. So we don't have a German science, a Japanese science, and an Italian or European or American science. Of course, the only differences are in the funding policies and the economics and the interest of how to utilize science to either explore, so find a way to create a new product, or come to market with some new concept and idea. So my background, very briefly, is that I come from a health background. I have been a traumatologist treating injuries and rehabilitating people from car accidents, sports accidents and strokes, etc. And I've been a clinical psychologist for 40 years. And those two backgrounds in themselves were interesting because I got to see the impact of thoughts and feelings on the physiology through the nervous system, hormonal system, and the body electric. And then, if someone's got anything longer than 6 weeks, means your body hasn't found a way to heal. So this becomes a chronic disorder. And what is the impact of that situation on your psychology? So over the years, I've been working with nanotechnology in the form of human biological technology. And I searched for something that was more powerful and practical and direct than medicines that we normally take. It doesn't matter whether they're pharmaceuticals or natural medicines. I discovered, and actually rediscovered from the time of Tesla, that plasma, which is very high voltage but practically no amperage, activates cellular activity. And that was being done from the 1880s and 90s all the way to the 1930s until they were taken away from the market by the pharmaceutical companies because they were too efficient and effective. Mostly produced in the US, Germany, France, and the UK. So those devices practically don't exist anywhere at all. There is one gentleman I know who basically finds them, the vintage ones, and repairs them. But there were handbooks, and they were put together by medical doctors for over 300 or 350 different disorders that medical doctors were using those devices for. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do some homework and find out how I can integrate all of this. And I've been doing that for 4 decades now. I use light, sound, electricity, magnetic fields, Tesla plasma, and radio waves to activate cellular membranes, the mitochondria, and genes. And you get very powerful results very quickly. So basically I was able to augment the therapeutic process by anywhere between 300 and 1,000%, meaning, first off, helping the natural healing process, and at the same time helping a disorder or an injury to recover very quickly. So Over the last few decades, I've been looking also at because I've been an educator. That was my first degree in science and mathematics from Sydney University. And I grew up in Australia. I moved away about 35 years ago. And been in the UK for quite a while, 30 years now, and I've traveled to Russia, and I've been doing a lot of research into the paranormal and metaphysical, because the Russians have done the most amount since the 1920s, believe it or not, but they've only translated around 10% of what they have found. And this research was done by government institutions, including the Russian Academy of Sciences. So they have been able to actually explain a lot of paranormal, metaphysical phenomena through scientific language, using parameters such as heart rate variability, oxygen uptake, blood pressure, etc. Hardcore physics and biophysics as parameters, basically involving going into altered states of consciousness, meditative states, trance states, the phantom arm. There are many, many different aspects. And they also, I have a colleague, Dr. Konstantin Korokov, who measured the fingertips, the photonic emissions of dead people. So he went to a morgue and he was allowed to actually use his device on people that were dead up to 10 days, and there was still a mild photonic emission from the fingertips of a corpse. So the actual border, the boundary between life and death, and here's the fundamental for me, the physical, the visible, tangible, physical reality, and the invisible, intangible, metaphysical reality. What is the connection? And that's what I've been researching, in particular over the last 25 years. And where science is concerned, we keep using the word as if there's one fundamental science. Yes, there's one fundamental influential form called mechanistic, Newtonian mechanistic science, which is reductionist, and it states that everything is based on matter, and everything therefore is determined, and that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of your brain. However, we've come to realize, first off, there is a brain in the head, the encephalic brain. There is a brain in the heart called the cardiac brain. There's a brain in the gut, which is probably the most important one. In every culture I know, they talk about the Bauchgefühl in German, and the gut feeling, something coming from down here, which I see has to do with grounding. So, and it's also your center of gravity, which is very interesting. So in our head we think, and it's got billions of neurons, so it's very electrical. In our heart we feel, and it has less neurons, around 60,000, but it's around 10,000 times more powerful in its magnetic field than the brain in your head. So this is a different type of brain, but the brain in the gut has literally millions of neurological connections and probably trillions of microorganisms that live within us. So the notion that we own ourselves, we own our thoughts, and we own something has been fabricated in our minds. So I'm going to be moving into artificial intelligence fairly soon regarding this entire venture. And I would like to just briefly point out now that our conscious mind, especially through the sense of sight, alters what it is that we see. We pick up at best 10% of what is there through photons, and then transmission of those in the filaments and the cones of light into color and tones. The rest is being fabricated by our brain. We do the same thing with hearing, less so with smelling and touching. So my background also is that I'm a cognitive scientist. It's a science of how we get things, how we learn, and a neuroscientist, and I'm a clinical psychologist, as mentioned, and a integrated medical practitioner. Having brought all the experience and knowledge of these different fields together, I utilize them to help us understand ourselves, not as an epiphenomenon of a thought, but as a being that is beyond an organism. I define the human being as a constantly expanding, interactive, dynamic, not static and closed, energy and information matrix. We are an interface between Earth and the universe. We are picking up geomagnetic fields from the Earth that activate our biomagnetism. We pick up electromagnetic frequencies from the sun that activate our physical body, and that becomes our biomagnetic field. So we have the faculties of thought, and feeling and senses and the body electric. And when those all work together, that energy in motion is guided or influenced by our consciousness. So it's a very, very complex interface that occurs there, and it's very hard to define, because if we're using a paradigm and a language that specifically is focused on just seeing the three-dimensional linear reality, which is what our Newtonian mechanistic science model gives us, we have a very limited perspective of the reality. Anything beyond the third dimension, means fourth and fifth, the psychic causal planes, the feeling and the thought, is difficult to describe using the paradigm of the three-dimensional science. So quantum physics creates some kind of bridge there, but it's actually a world that is far, far too great, because it talks about so many different levels of reality and the fact that we can utilize our mind in very different ways when we learn to. So I've been exploring meditation. What is meditation? How to define it, because we've got many different lineages and many different modes of operating. And we had to basically find a bottom line set of references. And I looked at, for example, attention and the focus, where our attention is, and our awareness and our focus as the fundamental, let's call them baseline parameters. And my colleague, who was a student and now is a practicing scientist and psychologist, will be speaking about that tomorrow, delivering that research work that we have done on meditation. So now, in alignment with where we are, sustainability. This economy, governing by natural law for a non-violent and green economy. We need to see first and foremost that violence is not just something that's physical, that when we lose our temper, we get angry and we basically strike someone or shed blood. We're looking at violation of human rights through activities such as data exploitation. Our data is being captured and utilized mostly for commercial purposes, and in some other instances for surveillance purposes, so-called security. But there is a lack of transparency there that we need to understand and help ourselves understand what our actual rights are within this. Cognitive warfare. So utilizing that data, especially through smartphones, our handsets that we are keeping very close to us 24/7, the internet and social media is also a very powerful way of influencing not only our conscious, but our subconscious mind. We wake up in the morning thinking that our conscious mind makes decisions and we're in charge of things, but actually about 95% of what it is that we do is directly connected to our subconscious happening. The secret weapon of mass destruction is in fact a mobile handset, and smartphones are very, very powerful in being utilized as that particular instrument. So our attention and our attention span is the new battleground. Social and political subversion, what's that about? Misinformation. We start first with the idea of Chinese whispers. So a particular information gets absorbed and is circulated by thousands, hundreds of thousands and millions, and it alters. So when we look at the way media utilizes misinformation and then inserts disinformation consciously, the two together create a dissonance, and that basically is a type of noise, which I call information noise. Its purpose is to have you oversee the hidden meaning of what is being conveyed. Economic warfare is about inequitable trade and resource hoarding. Means the resources that we know that we need and other countries may need, we stack it up, we hoard it, and we utilize it as a commercial advantage. And then violation of the planet. We end up taking a lot more than we need. We haven't understood that we need to find a balance between what we use and what we put back. The energy challenge so far for IT infrastructures. The global data center consumption today is estimated at around 415 terawatts. That number means a big number. So a gigawatt is billion and a tera is trillion watts. By 2024, that was last year. That represents around 1.5% of the global electricity that is utilized and the demand according to the Energy Agency, the International Energy Agency. But the forecast is that by 2030, that's going to go up to 13%. 13% of the global electricity that we utilize will be taken up by data centers. And that could easily increase a lot more depending on our hunger for the usage of AI. So this surge is primarily driven by the expansion of the AI centers. AI is very clever in terms of what it is that it does for us, and I'll explain in more detail what it's actually doing. It's fundamentally data crunching. But the more data you put in, the more energy is being consumed. So every single computation, because that's what it is, that is performed by AI, will be increased when we start using quantum computing and quantum supercomputing enormously. So this was just a chart to show that the commercial and public 8% will be going up to 13%. That's basically, is there a pointer on this? No. Yes. Okay. Now let's look at the human brain under assault, the cognitive crisis. We had minimal influence in the past, at the turn of last century. The most significant influential factor was the introduction of radio waves, which did actually influence our cellular function in the 1920s. And so we've gone to a constant intervention where our cognitive environment is now artificially engineered. We're being constantly bombarded by information, not only in your conscious mind, in your subconscious mind, in the airwaves. There are frequencies and codes that are being sent constantly to interfere with harmonic patterns in the way that your cells normally function. So this excess of technological intervention also includes heavy metals, nanoplastics. Every human being's got around 4 credit cards worth of nanoplastics. It's everywhere in the ocean. Then it basically goes up into convection, into the rain, and then that pours down into the soil, and then it leaches into the soil, and we eat these nanoplastics. They interfere with hormonal activity greatly for both males and females. Then we've got high frequency waves, which of course they're everywhere, and you're holding them in your handset, which is around 2.4 gigahertz, which basically means billions of hertz. The normal healing frequency for your body is around 0.5 to 29-30 hertz, up to 100 for when you're ill. So that's basically the pulsed electromagnetic fields. Imagine having 2.4 gigahertz or 2.4 billion cycles per second in your hand very frequently. So that does influence the way in which our cells will actually be able to regenerate and restore normal functions. We've got then introduction of high processed foods, and they've all greatly compromised the psycho-mental, emotional, and bioelectric interface in our bodies. And then this has adversely affected our attention span. And this is really important, our ability to be aware, to have clarity, our boundaries, and our psycho-emotional, psycho-mental boundaries, and our decision-making process. Why? When you're picking up more information than your brain can actually process, you get information overload just like a computer. And what happens with a computer screen is it freezes. Well, many times we freeze and we get into that dead zone. And the reason is we are picking up many more stimuli, or those stimuli activate these processes, and we cannot actually match the speeds, to the extent where the adult attention span around 30 years ago was 1.5 minutes, and now it's reduced to around 4 seconds. And that of a goldfish is around 8 seconds. So our natural cognitive rhythms have been violated, and media with the misinformation and disinformation equals this cancellation, the info noise. So your conscious mind switches off because firstly we've satisfied your left brain with information and data. Secondly, we satisfied your feelings with the story, and you think, okay, I'm now flowing with this. I bought into this story. And finally, anybody can broadcast information that very easily gets stored in your subconscious. So finally, in addition, we have a very strong interference in our circadian cycles. They change every 3 hours, and there's 3/8 of 24 hours per day, representing very strong and specific hormonal, electrical, and neurological shifts in the body. All of these are being influenced greatly by the system that we have set up around us. Now, introducing the Ministry of Natural Law. It's a transformative global initiative establishing a non-violent green economy based on custodian governance. It means integrating the green technologies which incorporate green nanotech, quantum supercomputing, artificial intelligence, aerospace, the chips, the data centers, the algorithms and clouds. We need to go from cradle to rebirth, understanding that we can actually reconstruct, taking away, for example, instead of using electrons over copper on the silicon chips, we can replace that with light over graphene, monatomic graphene, which is far quicker, far more storage, and a lot less resistance, meaning a lot less energy needs to be utilized. So the core principle here is to have a decentralized, blockchain-based system for transparency and self-sovereignty of every person within the society. The goal is to unify health, education, technology, finance, ecology and law, security as well, under a framework of natural law. This economy comes from two words. Physis means nature and nomos means law. Natural law, we're going to look at it in a different context to the way in which it has been defined until now. So let's just look at the first pillar. A truly green economy means algorithms, cloud infrastructure, chips and so forth are designed for energy efficiency and fully recyclable. So recyclability is very, very important. And that should be, so by 2030 we said 13 to 14% of our energy resources will be needed to power our collective technical needs, and then the greatest contributor will be data centers, IT, and of course artificial intelligence. So data-driven and tech-enabled. We need to have technology not just for extraction but for regeneration. This is critical to understand. The green and sustainable computing. We need to democratize artificial intelligence while reducing its environmental footprint. And this means empowering anyone to build intelligent systems without needing to learn complex mathematics and coding. Until now, it takes 3 to 5 years to learn complex mathematics and coding to be a programmer of artificial intelligence. We have a system where we have produced or created an operating system where you can learn how to utilize the operating system in 6 weeks and spend the rest of your time, 36 weeks approximately, in learning a course that you actually can design. And this is very important. Select an area, we have 30 so far, and over 105 modules. And then you can, for example, law, you can add finance, trading, you can add fashion to it, you can add health to it. They are different modules that take 6 weeks, 36 to 72 hours to learn. The quantum manufacturing and photonic chips. So, as I mentioned, using light over graphene is one example. It has been developed already in its prototype stage by a laboratory in Canada, and they are looking at doing that in other countries as well. So we're looking at a drastic reduction in global CO2 emissions as well as from computing. So managing billions of transistors with minimal energy, replacing transistors with light is one example, because every single artificial intelligence calculation is literally billions of on-off switching of transistors. And then custodian governance. Governance by natural law, democratizing artificial intelligence creation while reducing its environmental footprint. So we're moving from ownership of what we think we own to custodianship, where we are carers of nature, of our resources, of our communities, of our environment, of our planet. So decentralization, a blockchain-based system ensures trust and equity. Self-sovereignty is about individuals owning their own data, their own identity, and their own creations, being responsible and equitable within trade and governance, designed to be non-violent and fair for all participants. And finally, custodians and not owners. We are permanent stewards of the planet's resources. Instead of thinking about how we can extract resources that are not easily or readily replenishable, we need to understand how we need to take care of what we do have and not indulge in excess for the purpose of trying to increase our economy based on resources that have been actually stolen from host countries. Just to say here, between 5 countries of Europe, that includes Portugal, Spain, France, the UK, and Holland, they had over 300 colonies around the world. They influenced many countries. So that is how they built their resources, but that's an old order mode of operating, which, as a result of technology, and through the United States in particular, they've influenced practically the entire planet through tech. And we have a very different infrastructure and geopolitical situation. The Chinese saw this from about 45, 50 years ago. Hence, when Nixon went to China and signed that first agreement, opening the doors and allowing American products to be produced in China, they cleverly understood that resources for producing anything to do with mass production, but in particular IT, was the way forward. So instead of using weapons of any kind of destruction, they just went in and purchased. And of course, they didn't necessarily need to put a gun to anyone's head. It was a fair deal going to various countries and saying, your infrastructure isn't good, we'll assist you with it, we'll put the money in and we'll extract this in return. So there are many interesting parallels between China and the way it developed and the way the United States of America has conducted its modes of operating. The core principles are self-organization, really there. This economy means self-generating, self-sustaining, and self-managing, based on a principle of self-organization. Albert Szent-György won a Nobel Prize. He's a Hungarian scientist for working out that water, and the water molecule in its different forms, self-organizes. Now, we are made 70% by volume and 99% molecularly of water. Our body knows how to self-organize because of this fundamental factor. Water is the third most abundant substance in the entire universe. First is hydrogen, then helium, then water. And with scientific colleagues of mine, one in particular from Lomonosov University in Russia, we presented a paper on water and consciousness, to the extent where we said without the presence of water, you would not be able to identify with or experience consciousness. So our organism already knows how to self-organize and co-work with itself. We have lost connection with ourselves in this manner. We need to learn how to go back to our tradition of meditation and introspection and go on a journey to understand the relationship between your thoughts, your feelings, your physical body through the senses, your body electric, and your consciousness. Our conscious mind, it is our conscious mind, unfortunately, that does interfere with natural processes that leads to inner disputes, conflict, and chaos. We're picking up around 20 million stimuli per second from our external environment, and our conscious mind is a very powerful filter. It only basically allows for around 40 of those stimuli to be recorded. So it's a very powerful filter based on survival, because if you took away that filter with something like LSD, for example, a psychotropic substance, you would start seeing many more things that you were either not aware of or your brain could not process within that one moment. So it puts you into a psychotic state, fundamentally. So the foundation of violence is the inability to actually listen to and feel and hear yourself. because the dispute gets set up between the disorganization of our mental faculty, our feelings, our senses, our physical body. They all represent, in the eyes and ears of your cells, they all represent very key information data points. And we need to find a way to broker that. So fundamentally, the unified framework, we need equitable, non-violent finance, regenerative and sustainable ecology, empowering and democratized education, transparent and natural rights based on the law that we have, more transparent and natural law-based laws, and custodian resilience. Finally, just to say, from a violent, what I call extraction-based economy, to a non-violent custodian-based economy. I invite people to consider becoming a custodian of the mother, championing the green technology, and then demand governance based on natural law back to the way in which your organism and your matrix was designed by the great architect in the cosmos. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Constantine of Paulos. You have great new ideas, clean AI, this economy,
I don't know, are you happy? We're working on this.
Okay.
By the way, we inaugurated this in Delhi on Mahatma Gandhi's birthday at the India Habitat Center. I had ministers there, I had spiritual representatives, I had scientists, researchers, economists, former head of national security for the United States of America, Lama Shalpa, His Eminence, and all sorts of people. It was a very powerful event, but it was, the ball is rolling.
We thank you, Dr. Paulos. I don't know whether we have a few minutes for discussion, depending on maybe Dr. Cherian Eapen. Please come forward. Dr. Paulos, would you come down and sit here?
Yes.
Yes. We will have a very brief time for these questions or comments. The floor is open. You see, both have a very wide experience. Dr. Eapen has lived in the Soviet Union and in the US. During the Cold War, so he shuttled between the two powers. So his experience is very valuable. And Dr. Paulos, same thing. He has your expertise in several fields. Being a medical doctor, and you have branched out to many other disciplines. So we value your experience and your contribution. Thank you. Any question? Oh,
Very impressive talk. I probably missed some aspects. I always find Bhutan in the country which is very close to Himalayan world. They are doing extremely well in terms of sustainable development, in terms of carbon neutrality, in terms of green technology, although they are not very rich. Could you please elaborate on that?
Are you talking about?
Bhutan is a good example.
In Bhutan?
Bhutan, yes.
Yeah. Well, if the whole planet were to follow that model, I think we would be in a different situation. But Bhutan, I think, didn't even have traffic lights until 30 years ago, or certainly not television. That was very recent. So I think the king made a decision there to not allow Western intervention, especially through technology, to more or less disturb the balance that they have had for centuries. And it is a Buddhist country, and the king is following those principles, I think, quite validly and loyally. But the world is very, first and foremost, Bhutan is almost a utopic situation, and it really is a difficult situation for the rest of the world to try to follow or utilize that as an example. It's an example of what can be done on a small scale. I mean, democracy was created in Greece in city-states that were no bigger than 100,000 people. So the moment you get beyond that, it's really difficult to manage. So krasis means the whole demos is of the people. But the only way that that can happen is if you educate the people, if you bring them into the decision-making process. And what I'd like to add there is that I work a lot with Gen Zs and now with Gen Alphas. And if they are not included in the decision-making process, they do not feel a part of our future. And therefore, most of them, they've actually said to me, we just want to wait for you guys to become dead dinosaurs. You're already old dinosaurs. So I'm saying, okay, fair enough. Would you like to be part of the decision-making process? And of course, we've not invited them in the past, so they don't really feel empowered. So I'm constantly encouraging them. I don't challenge them. We don't need to. But one thing we need to understand, they were born with tech in their hands. We weren't. We had a very different interface. Our nervous system is programmed in a completely different way to someone who's been holding a device in their hand, and their interface is virtual. And I mean, I've been to families of friends of mine whose kids will send a text to the person next to them at the dinner table asking, can you pass the potatoes? So it's a very interesting situation. We need to appreciate that that's their reality. We can't criticize them and say they've become zombie robots. But we do need to find a way to make them feel more included, especially in decision-making processes. I think we need to have in every government on the planet a youth representation that is representing the future. So actually their job is to point out to us that we have missed certain things, especially where tech is concerned. It's not fair to introduce tech at this rate, like AI, which is costing billions and trillions, and not actually consulting the generation through whom it grew. Without them, most of us wouldn't know how to use what they can use. And I know for a fact that most people only know how to use around 10% of their very secret weapon of mass destruction. It's very smart and there's a huge amount of programming in it. We at most use around 10%. That generation probably uses 60 to 70%. It's very different. Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, we have already entered the next session because Dr. Saul Thomas was the person who asked the question. He's going to speak next. He is a former Vice Chancellor of the University and a world-renowned nanoscientist. In fact, can we then begin with Dr. Saul Thomas? Okay. If there is no more question, but Dr. Cherian Eapen is with us, one of the sponsors of the conference, so you can approach him anytime. He has a wealth of experience in the socialist and the capitalist system. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we will start the next session. Okay. Will you come down?